All right, so today I wanted to make a video about ballistic coefficient. Now, this is a concept that is very important to almost exclusively long-range shooters because hunters don't really care, even just close to mid-range target shooters don't really care. This is something that's specifically important for long-range shooters, something that I'm interested in. And it's something that, there's a lot of new people, a lot of people that don't really understand this stuff. So I wanted to talk about it. It is fairly simple, although there is some important things to understand. Now, um, when you're buying ammo, a lot of manufacturers will post right on the box, or at the very least, you'll be able to find it on their website, the ballistic coefficient of bullets. Now, what is ballistic coefficient? Um, in a nutshell, it is essentially how efficient does a bullet fly through the air. And there's two different numbers for it. There's G1 and G7. Now, they're essentially the same. They're measuring the same thing. The only difference being is when you're trying to figure out these ballistic coefficients, you need to compare it to a neutral bullet. And the difference being is that the bullet that's compared in G1 is not as modern and as efficient as G7. So when you look at these numbers, the G1 number is always going to be a lot higher than the G7. People wonder, which one should you use. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Although most people still use G1. So yeah, that's going over that. But like I said, in a nutshell, it is specifically or in a nutshell, how efficiently a bullet flies through the air. Now, the higher the number, the better. But there's also important things to understand in that what is a good ballistic coefficient for one caliber may be different for another caliber. But the one thing you do know for sure is that the higher the number, the more efficiently the bullet will fly through the air. Now, there is other things that come into play here as well. I mean, things like velocity and stuff as well. Like if you push a bullet really slow that has a high ballistic coefficient versus a bullet a lot faster but has a decent one. Yeah, there's other things that come into play. But the one thing that when you're looking for long range shooting bullets, um, almost all the time, the better bullet is going to be the one with the higher ballistic coefficient. So let's get into some examples here just to kind of go over it briefly because it is fairly simple. Now, 223, 556, 22 caliber bullets. The highest they go basically here, it looks like I mean, I'm just on Hornady's website here to give some examples. We have the 73 grain ELD match is 390, sorry, 398. 75 grain match, 395. That is very, very good for a 22 caliber gun. If you look at let's just say a standard 55 grain bullet, it's 254. So this is another thing that people will also recognize too, is that the difference between your average hunting bullet and a good quality match bullet will be a lot, like a lot, especially for like the calibers that people commonly use for target shooting, like your I mean 223 to some degree, but your 6.5s, even 308s, and then the bigger calibers as well. Though there will be a big difference, and I'll give examples of that as well. Getting into 6.5 Creedmoor, probably the most common one. You have, let's just say, a common hunting bullet here, 129 grain SST, 485. What's another one? American Whitetail, which is, I believe, just a soft point bullet, 445. But then you get into some of the heavier match bullets, the 140 grain ELD match, 646, ELDX, 625, ELD match, 147 grain, 697, which is absolutely phenomenal. But again, you compare it, and this is another thing that's also important to understand too, is that just because a bullet's a match bullet doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be great for long range shooting. You compare it to the 120 grain ELD match, it's only 486. Like there's a lot of 308 match bullets that are going to be better than that. So that's another thing for people to understand too, is that all things being equal, you want to use the heaviest bullet possible because the heavier the bullet, the higher the ballistic coefficient's typically going to be. You get into the 308s, 168 grain match, 450. EOD match, 523, 178 grain match, 530, 178 grain ELDX, 5.52. So again, this is another thing people will see too, is that although the 6.5 Creedmoor has the capabilities of being clearly better than the 308, some of the better 308 match bullets are actually pretty comparable. Like the ELDX here, 5.52. If you look at the average 140 grain 6.5 Creedmoor bullet, it's going to be in that, 580 usually is the tip. 584 I think is the typical one for like the typical 140 grain match bullets. So they're not that much different, and that's something that to get the full effects of some of these calibers and bullets, you need to use the really heavy bullets. And then you get into something like, just to give an example of a really, really high quality bullet, 300 PRC, 225 grain ELD match, 777, which is again absolute, like anything above 600 is really good. Anything above 700 is like crazy good. And then you get into like the 800s, which basically I think some of the 300 grain match 338 Lapua bullets are up in the 800s, but I don't think there's anything 30 cal and under that are in the 800s. So if you, like I say, if you can get into the 700, 6 and 700s, that is a really, really, really good quality bullet. So again, like I say, there are some examples of it. Again, Hornady is just the best example of it. That's why I'm here. But again, like I pointed out here too, let's just look at some of the 308 ones, just the standard hunting bullets here. 415, 435. Like again, so when you're doing long range shooting, you got to make sure you have a quality. Not that you can't do it. Like honestly, I've shot 700-800 yards actually fairly accurately with just some standard hunting bullets, to be quite honest. Like I've shot some half MOA groups at 700-800 yards with hunting bullets, but it's still going to be harder to do it with hunting bullets, right? So that's the point I'm trying to make here. So again, like I say, just to wrap it up quick here, when you're looking at long range shooting, you always want to check out that ballistic coefficient, because, like I said, the higher the number, the better the better the bullet's going to fly through the air. It's going to make your job easier, right? Unless you're a complete expert on, adjusting for wind, temperature, all that kind of, which again, 99% of people aren't. Even amongst professionals, it's still not easy once you get to, 1,000 and beyond, right? Because again, it's things can, the wind 1,000 yards downrange can be different than the wind where you're at, right? Um, but again, this is the really, really important concept to understand for long range shooting, because it's basically the most important thing when you're looking at bullets, because like I say, the higher that number, the better. Now, like I say, there's other things that come into play as well, which again are things that I've gone into in other videos. Obviously, there's cost, there's recoil, there's other things as well, right? Like if you have a real heavy recoiling 300 PRC with a, like I say, the 777, versus the 6.5 Creedmoor or even 6.5 PRC, which would be even better. Like I say, that could be a reason to maybe not go quite as high, right? So obviously there's other things involved, but I'm just trying to go over the concept of ballistic coefficient because it is very important for people to understand. So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.